welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all lovely at the end of January. It's almost over, guys. One more day and then it's February, then January is finished. I hope you're all wonderful and lovely. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of January. I read 9 books in the month of January, 2 of which were audiobooks, and I will start with the 2 audiobooks. The first one I won't really say much about because I've mentioned it in like my currently reading, and I've been listening to it since November, so it's been spoken about a lot on this channel and a lot on other people's channels as well, and that is Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is the book of Michelle Obama's life from when she was born to basically, like, pretty much when Barack Obama is no longer president of the United States. I love this. It's narrated by herself, which is like another bonus. I love books that are narrated. I love particularly like memoirs and autobiographies and stuff that are narrated by the author. She's just amazing. There's just so much to her than I realised. I mean, obviously I'm not American, I don't live in America, so what I've seen of her has just been basically Barack Obama's wife, and just looking into her life, she's just so strong and fantastic and amazing. I keep saying amazing. Don't call it Becoming, call it amazing. Loved it, gave it 5 stars. The next book I listened to on audio is another book that I gave 5 stars, and I adored this as well. This is Pages & Co. Tilly and the Book Wanderers by Anna James, and it is just the most nostalgic, like when I talk about it my face just lights up because I just love it so much. It's so nostalgic, it's so joyful. You follow Tilly, who lives in a bookshop with her grandparents, and she discovers that she can do something called book wandering, whereby she can read books whilst in libraries and bookshops and go into the story. It really revisits some like really cutesy like children's stories. Anne of Green Gables, A Little Princess. Her grandmother's a big fan of Pride and Prejudice, and her grandfather likes Sherlock Holmes, and yeah, there's just this whole sort of like system and world whereby book wandering is something that is well known. Book wanderers are a sort of type of people, and there are these people who can book wander, and you find out all about this under library that exists under London and under the British Library, and it's just marvellous. Like, as I said, like nostalgia. It made me feel the way that I felt when I used to read books when I was little. It made me feel like reading Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, that sort of level of like, how amazing is this? And like, as a new idea, I just thought it was absolutely beautiful. It was so well executed. I absolutely loved it. I've met Anna a few times. She hosts the Lush book club, and she's ever so wonderful. And yeah, I hope she realises what a wonderful book she does. I believe it's going to be a series, so I'm really looking forward to reading more into it. But yeah, it's set, and there's also just other bits about it. Like, it reminds me of like another reason I felt like it was a little bit like Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe is that there's so many like evocative, wonderful bits about food in there, and like it's set at half term, and I remember like half terms and going to my nan's house because my mum and dad were at work, and eating like buttered rolls and sort of reading my book in their lounge and stuff like that, and it really just, yeah, it was just so nostalgic and wonderful for me. I absolutely adored it. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was wonderful. Really lovely, cozy story, amazing. And when I was talking about it in my currently reading, a few people had commented saying that the actual book itself with the illustrations is marvellous. So yeah, I think this is probably going to be the one that I'm going to buy because I would like to read the whole series. So those are the 2 audiobooks. As I said, I've read 9 books this month, 7 of which were actual books that I'm going to go through now. January has been such a long month that I've almost a bit forgotten about the books that I read at the beginning of the month. So do forgive me while we revisit them together. But I also started them at the end of December when like it was Christmas and things like that. So yeah, some of which I've forgotten. First of all being Sally Rooney, Mr. Salary. What's this about? This is about Suki, who moved in with Nathan because her mother was dead and her father was difficult. Oh, I think this is about a girl who is, oh God, I can't even believe this. A girl who is with an older guy. I really love Sally Rooney's writing, but yeah, maybe I need to revisit that because I think I gave it 3 stars, but I honestly cannot remember a bloody thing about it. That's awful, isn't it? The next book I read was Bonfire by Kristen Ritter. I've had this a while, and I quite enjoyed this. I read this as sort of like, fancied a crime read over Christmas, and I picked it up at the end of last year. This follows Abby, who's moved away from her hometown, and she goes back, she's a lawyer, and she goes back there to investigate a case which is about how there's a company, like a petrol company, is it petrol? Fuel or something. They've moved it, plastics, sorry, Optimal Plastics, at the town, which has become the sort of town's economic heart, and they give a lot of money to schools and sponsor a lot of things and things like that, giving a lot of jobs and stuff. But there's queries as to whether they're very ethical, and there's quite a lot of people that have fallen sick in the town and things like that. And there was, when she was at school, a group of girls got very, very sick, and one just disappeared, and it sort of revisits that. I quite liked it, and I enjoyed it at the time, and it kept me gripping everything. It's actually written by, as I said, Kristen Ritter, who is Jessica Jones. But yeah, as far as a thriller goes, quite enjoyed that. I'm putting these here. Is that wise? The next book is a 5-star book, and I absolutely loved it, and you will have seen this featured on my channel already this year. And that is Turning the Tide on Plastic by Lucy Siegel. The tagline here is How Humanity and You Can Make Our Globe Clean Again. I am doing a series on this channel going throughout 2019, where I am going to be reducing my use of plastic. The first half of the book is sort of talking about what plastic is doing to our planet, and the sort of history of plastic and what other countries are doing and things like that. And then the second half is set into 8 steps, all that begin with R, on how you can reduce your use of plastic. They are record, reduce, replace, refuse, reuse, refill, rethink, recycle. And I'm going to be working my way through those steps and doing a video whereby I do that step. I've already filmed the introduction to this series, and I will link that down below if you're interested. But so readable, so fantastic. Went to see her at the Cambridge Literary Festival in November last year. Thought she was amazing. Really, really helpful. Loads of tips in there. Like, makes you want to be very, very active. Cannot fault it. 5 stars. Thought it was fun. Wonderful. Fundeful, I said. Fundeful. The next book I read was My Thoughts Exactly by Lily Allen. My sister and her husband got me this for Christmas last year. Picked it up straight away, didn't I? This is Lily Allen's autobiography. It is very truthful, very, very truthful. She talks in here about her dependency on other people, her drug use, her affairs she's had, cheating on her husband. There is literally, like, if she's kept anything back, I'm saying if she kept anything, I don't feel like she's held anything back. She's really, really gone into it. I used to be a really big fan of Lily Allen when I was younger, and I used to love her music. And then I sort of just not fell out of love with her, just sort of drifted away from her. And this sort of has filled the years during which I drifted away from her. It spans all time. It sort of talks about her childhood and her relationship with her mother and her father and her brother and her stepsister. But yeah, I really, really liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I found it really... like completely readable, and it reminded, like, when I was younger, before I sort of got into my book groove, I used to read a lot of autobiographies, and very much enjoyed reading them. I remember, I've mentioned this already, but like reading the Jerry Halliwell autobiography, for instance, and it gave me the feeling of that, what it was like to read those books. So yeah, really enjoyed it, and if you're a fan, then I think definitely give this a go. But very much enjoyed it. It's beautiful. Like the end papers are lovely. It's this lovely sort of like, oh, I've got a bit of a bloody stain on there. It's got a lovely, lovely picture of Lily on the front there. And it's just set out really nicely. There's a lot of these like big chapter headings with these crisscross patterns. It's just a really, really nice book, and I really enjoyed reading it. And I liked it. I liked Lily. The next book I read was The Night Watch by Sarah Waters. This, I'm gradually getting my way through Sarah Waters' books. I love her writing. I think if you love historical fiction, if you like Daphne du Maurier, it's really, really like gothic-y and reminds me of that. This is set in the 40s, and it follows 4 people during the war, when some of those people are working on the night watch, whereby they go and collect bodies or take people to hospital if they've been involved in a bombing and things like that. You start later in the 40s. I can't remember when, 47, and you work your way back until you start off in 41. So you're finding stuff. When I first started reading it, I was like, oh, I wonder where this is going to go. Like the first bit section, you're like, oh, I wonder where this is going to go. And you never know where it goes because you work backwards. But it's really interesting to find out how these people met and what their backstory is. Like, for instance, in the first section, you're finding out about a chap called Duncan, and he's living with this older guy, and you're like, why is he living with this older guy? And then as you go back, you find out that he was in prison, and then when you go back again, you find out why he was in prison. And yeah, I've really, really loved it. Her writing is fantastic and amazing. She writes amazingly, and I loved it. I don't feel like I've read any books that work backwards before, so that was a real treat for me. But yeah, I just think she's fantastic. Every time I read, I still feel like The Paying Guests is still my favourite book by her. But every time I read a book by her, I'm so beside myself at how much I love her writing. Mercedes is listening to this on audiobook at the moment, although I think she may well be finished by now, and she says that the audiobook is amazing. The narrators do a fantastic job of like all the different London accents and everything. I'm just thinking I've got another, oh, The Little Stranger, which I've now listened to on audiobook as well. So I think I have now read all the Sarah Waters that I own, so I need to think about getting myself some more or listening to some more on audiobook, because loved it. 4 stars, gave it 4 stars, really, really enjoyed that. The next one I read was the translated fiction that I have been going on about. I have made it a something in 2019 that I would wish to read a translated fiction book every single month, because I thought I read 0, but someone commented on my last video and said you read The History of Bees, which was translated from Norwegian. So I did read 1 translated book last year, which still is not anything to be proud of. I should be reading a lot more, so reading 1 a month at the very least. And the one I read in January was Farewell My Orange by Iwaki Kei. This is translated by Meredith McKinney from Japanese, and it is, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. You follow 2 characters and their friendship, 2 female characters and their friendship. You follow Selima, who is from Nigeria, and she's living with her 2 sons in Australia, working a job in a meat factory, and just sort of taking each day as it goes, sort of like living hand to mouth almost. And then you also follow Sayuri, who has come to Australia from Japan with her husband, neither of which speak particularly good English. They meet at a night school English class, and they make friends through that. I really loved, you hear from Sayuri told through sort of like your ordinary prose, no that's a lie, Selima through your ordinary prose, and then Sayuri you hear through letters. She's writing letters to someone back at home, and she's addressing them Dear Teacher, I believe, yeah, Dear Teacher. What I really liked about it is that this friendship has developed, and they call each other different things. So they call each other names which aren't their names, so you're introduced to them as Selima and Sayuri, and yet Selima calls Sayuri Echidna, and I can't remember, she calls her like Yakuto or something like that. And there's other characters in there which they both call different names, but that being said, it wasn't confusing. It was just really beautifully done, and although not like the happiest of books, there's some pretty like there's some sad, really sad stuff in here that happens, particularly with in terms of like losing children, but I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was wonderful, and I would recommend it. It was ever so short. It was 134 pages long, 35 pages long, and yeah, I really loved it. Really loved it. So yeah, looking forward to reading some more translated fiction as the year goes by. 4 stars. And then I finished today, this is one of these little tiny Penguin moderns. This is the Daphne du Maurier one, The Breakthrough. I started reading this yesterday and I finished it today. This is like a little tiny short story. I don't think you could call it a novella because it's only 58 pages. And it was written in 1966, and it's just, she's just so bloody ahead of her time, Daphne du Maurier. The more I read of Daphne du Maurier, and I don't feel like it does apply to like my fave Daphne du Mauriers, like Rebecca and My Cousin Rachel, but there's some like Rachel slurs basically, particularly in the Christmas book that I read over Christmas. There are some in here as well which I can't fully enjoy them because of that. So although I'm saying she's ahead of her time, because this book itself is about life after death, and it follows a group of people who are trying to keep somebody's spirit alive after they die, and they've got a lot of like technical equipment, and it's all sort of like a bit ghosty. Actually, it is a bit ghosty because David was away last night and I went to pick it up and I was like, oh no, I don't know if I want to read that because I know what my imagination's like and I'll be overthinking it. So it is a bit spooky. She's ever so gripping and tense, but yeah, in some ways she's so ahead of her time with her ideas, but then the language itself is very much of that time. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars, and again, like her plots and her ideas are just fantastic, but yeah, the language brings it back down for me. So yeah, I gave that 3 stars. So those are the books that I read in the month of January. I hope you have all had a lovely January reading month. Let me know what you got up to reading in the month of January, and if you've read any of these guys that I've read here, and I will see you all again tomorrow for my January favourites. Bye!